All right, so my plan is to do the same thing I did last time with the lab practical. I think we can get away without any critical thinking questions, short answers, so we'll just be 50 multiple choice questions on the anatomy, which covers everything on the lab, the sheet, the handout that I gave you. That's histology as well as the gross anatomy, so make sure you're studying your slides as well. All right, questions? Anybody got questions? Everybody feels good about the lab? Okay, I guess this is the final exam review then. Yeah, let's tackle that.
Okay. So for the final exam, it's pretty much going to be based on all lecture exams, like 1 through 5. A little bit of everything.
Yeah, let me look at the. So I don't usually look at it from exams. Sorry, this is just a technical point. I usually look at it from the material. You know what I mean? But so I was thinking about it, and what I usually like to do actually is instead of doing everything, I like to just do the systems. So, you know, the stuff that we covered at the beginning, it's not really anatomy and physiology, you know, it's like the precursor stuff. So we're gonna just focus on the systems that we covered. So skeletal system, muscular system, nervous system, and then digestive system. All right, so then let me look at one more thing. Okay, so Ramon wants to know if the format is the same. Give me 1 second. Let me pull up what I need to look at. Okay, so assignments, equations. So yes, it's going to basically be the same format. It's just going to be a little bit longer. So basically, double everything. The emphasis will definitely be on the systems we spent more time on. So the muscular system, especially, and the nervous system, obviously, have a lot more time devoted to them. You know, like we covered more chapters and stuff. So I would look at it from that point of view. So, okay, so when did we do? I thought for some reason people would have questions about the lab. All ready for that. Okay, so we had, I don't know why I'm looking at that. I should just look at. All right, so we did skeletal system as the tissue and how it grows, how it attaches. We looked at joints as well, so don't forget that joints are in there. And basic movement, right, going along with the joints. I will not ask anything on the final exam from lab. Okay, the final exam is about lecture material, not about lab material. So there won't be anything, any lab questions on there. So just focus on the lecture stuff.
Do you recommend going over our past exams, like to review?
I think it doesn't hurt because ultimately, I don't, even though I tend not to repeat exact questions, you know, my goal with the initial exams is still the same as my goal with the final exams, which is to cover all the main concepts, right? Making sure that we've covered the anatomy and we've covered the physiology and all the different little categories of parts of these things that we've covered. So I'm still going to be asking you about a lot of the same things because those were, as best I could manage, the most important topics. So definitely going through your old exams is going to be a good way to identify areas where you have trouble to focus on. Also will help you identify areas that you don't need to spend as much time on because you understood it the first time. But you also want to go back and look at, you know, look at your materials based on the, you know, the book and especially the PowerPoints because, you know, just because something wasn't in one of the mid-semester exams doesn't mean for sure that it's not going to be on the final. Because I don't look at the old exams necessarily when I make the tests so much as I look back at the lecture materials. And I go through and I make it the same way that I made the initial exams.
Will you be posting like some sort of outline or is just whatever we go over, make our own?
I will try to do one this weekend. Have a lot of other things to tackle as well. But certainly I would always recommend that you guys make your own outlines and that you tackle the material with an eye towards what's going to be on the test because it's way more valuable for you to do it than for me to do it for you. And that's why I don't make study guides per se, because I don't think it actually benefits you and your learning. It just kind of narrows your focus instead of having you look at the material as a whole. So outlining is a really great way to start tackling the material because you don't want to look at all of it and get overwhelmed. You want to look at it and then break it down into chunks that you can actually handle, you know? And so for this, you want to start with, well, we're going to cover 4 systems. And then go from there, you know, like how much material did we cover for each system? Because at the very least, there's a whole chunk about like the gross anatomy of the system and the microscopic anatomy of the system, right? And we talked about the tissues that were present as far as the skeletal, muscular, and nervous systems. We spent some time looking at the tissues without even necessarily looking at how they came together into organs. The physiology is going to be important, as well as the regulatory stuff, because, you know, we try to teach anatomy and physiology with an eye towards the homeostasis. So we're always looking at how are these functions regulated, right? And that's why we always have that section where, okay, we've covered everything, now let's look at how other things can control this. So if you take it from there, and then you break down each section into smaller and smaller bits, that gives you an idea of the different things that you need to actually study. And, you know, since I'm drawing from the same stuff as I write this one, the style of it should be very similar to the previous ones, which is another advantage to looking at your old exams, because hopefully, you know, the whole idea of using other previous exams to study from is that, you know, everybody has their own style of exam writing. And by now, you guys should be used to mine. It just is what it is. Like, I can't change it, right? I can't change my lecture style either. So being as familiar with that as possible should help you get into the rhythm for the testing too. Cynthia wants to know how long you're going to have to complete it. Longer. I will definitely give you enough time to take the exam. So if I'm doubling it, then it should kind of be a doubled length of time to access it.
Do you remember if you happened to pass out the lecture exam to the students, or because I can't find it, so I don't know if you kept it. Or...
You know what? I suspect that I have it here somewhere. I think that I didn't have a chance to give it back to everybody before spring break.
Is there any way to access it? I know it's probably more work.
I can upload a blank version if you'd like. Okay. I think that I can do quite easily because I have it on my computer, so I can put that up. Yeah, I definitely, there's no way that I could get all of your actual exams up or anything, but if you just want to be able to review the questions and stuff, I can do that.
Okay.
And then as far as like the short answer stuff, again, it's going to be a lot of why and how questions for two reasons. One, because I want to discourage you from trying to just Google the answers, because I can't actually stop you from doing that. So what I can do is give you questions that can't simply be answered with a search. The other reason is that's kind of what I was supposed to do in the first place. I just don't, I don't usually push that as hard. But they're not meant to be difficult. They're meant to be covering things that we literally talk about in lecture. So the idea is that if you're going through this material, you have the information that you need to answer the questions. You just have to answer the question that's being asked rather than regurgitating whatever you can think of about that material. So do that part in your head. Think about, what do I know about the things that are in this question, and then answer the actual question. That's my best advice on that. Because I'm seeing a lot of giving me the information that is in the question or defining the terms, and that's great, but that's not answering the question. So make sure that when you answer your short answer questions that it actually answers the question, okay? And not just giving me information that is inspired by the words in the question. I can't really give you points for that.
So you mentioned that you grade on the, what is it, a curve?
Yeah, so
can you explain a little
so
how that works?
Yeah, so the final grades will most likely be curved. And the way that I do that is that I look at the entire class, and then curving just kind of involves applying a formula to the raw grades to kind of bring them into alignment with what they should be. So it's kind of about like raising everybody's grade in a way that's as equitable as possible. I don't curve in the same way every time because the grade spread isn't the same every time. And so until I have your raw final grades, I don't know what the curve is going to look like, if that makes sense. And I think that gives everybody a better final grade than if I had some sort of set policy in place about how I was going to curve. Okay, so Ramon wants to know about focusing more on muscular and nervous because we covered a lot of material in those systems. So yeah, so there, we're covering 4 systems. So obviously you need to study skeletal and go back and study whatever parts of digestive were troublesome for you on the exam you just took. But definitely look at the number of PowerPoints and the number of chapters that we cover for each system informs the how much of the exam each system will have. So we spent a lot of time on the nervous system. That means it's going to have a larger percentage of the final. And then muscular is a little bit more, but we covered a lot in skeletal as well, and so they're all going to have a decent enough chunk that you need to study all of it. The lab simulations will not be on the lab tests. I thought about it, but I'd rather focus on the anatomy. So as long as you completed them, you checked that box off.
For the final exam, do you think you'll be adding like, I don't know how you would be able to do it, but like pictures like this? Or you
I doubt it.
name? Okay.
I'm not really planning on it. It doesn't mean that the concepts we covered in those aren't relevant. So, you know, for like compact bone anatomy and you know, parts of a long bone, and what did we cover, like the organization of a muscle organ and a nerve and stuff like that. Doesn't mean those aren't relevant, but I wasn't really planning on using the diagrams again.
Okay.
So the final will be available in kind of a similar 24-hour window or so to the way we've been taking the exams. So you can tackle it at any point during the day that it's scheduled for. So it'll be on May 20th, but you'll have any time on May 20th to take it. I mean, I think that kind of covers it. For every system, there being about its tissues and how they form and their functions and their cycles. I mean, it's any material that I covered in the systems is fair game. So please don't take that as permission to skip something. I'm just kind of trying to explain how to break down that material to make it easier to tackle. As in, you know, we definitely covered tissues and like the anatomy of the system. And for some of them, we talked about formation, really just skeletal. And, you know, the physiology of the system at the microscopic and the macroscopic level, and then the various regulatory things involved as well. When is the final being uploaded? So probably the night before it will be accessible. I really hadn't figured out the exact timeline yet. So if anybody has like a timing issue for their exam where you're working all day on the 20th or something like that, just shoot me an email, okay? Because I can certainly adjust things for you. You just have to let me know. The final grades will be available after I grade everything. I can't be more specific than that. Usually, you know, it's within a week. I'll try my best to make it sooner than that. But it just depends on how long it takes for me to grade everything. I try to get everything else graded by the time you take your finals, so then I just have to grade your short answers on your final exam, but that still depends on other things, especially since, you know, like I have other responsibilities beyond this course, just like we all do. So within a week, you should have your grade. Yeah, so the lab exam will be focusing on the cadaver for the gross stuff, because that's what you were to be identifying. That's why we went through it that way. And then, of course, the other half of it is the histology off of the other website. So yeah, the assumption is that it's coming from the McGraw-Hill cadaver. That's where the images will come from, just like the last few exams. Okay, April. So if you're having trouble with that, it's probably an issue on your end. All of this stuff seems to work better if you're using something like Chrome. So definitely your internet browser can have an effect, as well as like the what do you call it? Like whether or not everything's fully updated or what version of the programs and the computer that you have. Unfortunately, it can be hard to make everything fully compatible. So like all the images should be JPEGs. Like that's as accessible as I can make them. So if people are having like technical difficulties, I'm happy to try to help you work on it or direct you to somebody who can. So yeah, for the liver slide, because you can't, it's too difficult to identify the parts of the triad. So I'm certainly not going to ask you if it's like, a hepatic artery or a bile, a bile ductule or something like that. So I mean, the triad itself as a structure, we can certainly identify, so that would be the most detail that I would ask you on that. So you're kind of just looking at like central veins, triads. What else was there? But yeah, we can't really identify the parts of the triad. So we won't try. So yeah, it's bile ducts, portal triad as a group, but not as the individual things. Hepatocyte central veins are your lobule structures then to identify. Okay. All right, so upper esophageal sphincter. Let me pull that up. So obviously it can be tricky when certain structures are not, all right, this was not the right one, are not well identified. So a couple of things to point out here. So if you look, the esophagus they have running to about here. And the laryngopharynx is the last portion of the pharynx. So nasopharynx is up here. Oropharynx is here. And then laryngopharynx kind of encompasses the area between the larynx and the beginning of the esophagus. So the upper esophageal sphincter is right where the esophagus begins, which is in this general area. Now, they didn't give us a really good view of that. For whatever reason, they didn't feel the need to actually show it to us. But it's basically this muscle, well, that's not a muscle, that's actually cartilage, but it's basically right in here. So if we're indicating something between, this is the epiglottis, you guys don't actually have to know that, but if we're indicating something between here and here, it's going to be right in this area. And you know, if you're being asked about the upper esophageal sphincter, esophagus is not going to be an option. So if something's pointing at it and you're like, well, that's part of the esophagus and it's in the neck, and you're not asking me for esophagus as the answer, it is going to be upper esophageal sphincter. And I hope you all noticed also how much tongue there is that we don't think of as our tongue, because that part creeps me out every time. Just throw that out
there. And for the teeth, can you show me like what kind of diagram you're going to use? Or
so for the teeth, I was just going to use this teeth one.
Okay. Just know where the canines and premolar, which is pretty simple.
Yeah, no, I didn't want to make you guys learn every single one. It really didn't feel relevant enough. Okay. So we're just looking at identifying, distinguishing between the 4 types of teeth. Okay.
And the mandibular maxillary.
Right, which is just, you know, is it on the mandible or the maxilla?
Okay, maxilla upper, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so I mean, if we're looking at the different types of teeth, it's going to be this image right here. And then if we're looking at maxillary versus mandibular, it's either going to be this one, or it's going to be one of these mouth ones, because they're showing, you know, like the teeth in their normal situation. But that would just be like maxillary versus mandibular.
I think this one's also showing all the salivary glands.
Yep. Yep. I mean, we've got oral cavity too, but for this one, they didn't really do the teeth, right? We just have these little slivers of teeth, and so it's not a good view for that. But yeah, I mean, they made a whole view just for the teeth, so I'm gonna use it. The yellow part. For this one, you mean? Where were we? So this yellow stuff, if that's what you're asking about, that's not part of the gland. That's adipose tissue. So the glands are kind of pale and fleshy. Anything else on the gross anatomy that anybody was having questions about? Yeah, so Monday, even though we wouldn't have been meeting in real life, I'll be here 8:30 for the final review. That way you guys have had a chance to actually tackle the material again. Anything you have questions about, we can go back over. Anything that you want clarified, stuff like that. Any other questions now? I guess we get stopped here. I don't know a ton of detail about the fall. I know that they're planning on having as much online as possible. So if it is possible to do it online, it will be online, which I do believe includes all of the anatomy and physiology classes. They're working on the best like simulation and online 3D modeling stuff. So probably that website that I gave you guys when we started this stuff will probably be part of it. But I know that they are working on making sure that it's not, like costing you extra, that it's basically being paid for by the lab fees that you paid anyway. So like, like the stuff we're using right now, the McGraw-Hill, usually the students have to pay a fee for that. So we're probably not going to keep using it. We don't want to make you guys pay anything extra. But I would definitely anticipate being online for lecture for sure, and then for lab for almost all your classes. There are only a very few labs that simply cannot be simulated, and they're trying to figure out how to do that in a way that still maintains social distancing and stuff. Sorry about that. Any other questions about anything that anybody has any concerns about? If you can't think of them now, just shoot me an email. Honestly, for the final exam as you guys study, I would like open up a draft email for me, and when you have questions, just type them in and then email them to me before Monday morning if you can, so that if it's something that would benefit everybody, that we can tackle it for the review, even if you can't make it. Because a lot of times we have questions and then we don't ask it right away, and then we forget it, and then we don't ever get it addressed. But sometimes kind of having a running draft is the best way to end up getting all of your questions out. Okay, so just email me if you have questions. If you're able to make it to the review on Monday morning, that'd be great. The lab will go live on Friday. If Friday is a really bad day for you, please email me about that too. Because again, I can make some adjustments to the timing of these exams. You just have to let me know. Okay?
After you post the lab exam, let's say Friday evening, we have until Saturday midnight to complete it?
I was going to post it for the whole of Friday, but yeah, it can be through Saturday. Like I said, I mean, the exact timing of these things isn't like a big deal for me. I just need to know what works for you guys. So I've been trying to do like a 36-hour window to give everybody their best chance of taking it.
Okay. All right. Okay, well, we'll see you on Monday.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, one more week, you guys. We can do it. All right, anybody else have questions? Otherwise, we all have stuff to do, I guess.